I'd like to start with a riddle that's inspired by one of my favorite TV shows. Imagine that after you die, there's a cosmic scorecard. And if you did good things when you were alive, you get points, and you go to the good cosmic afterlife. And if you did bad things when you were alive, you lose points, and you go to the bad cosmic afterlife. And this is where the riddle begins. In the year 1625, someone bought his grandmother roses for her birthday, and he got points. But in the year 2025, someone bought his grandmother roses for her birthday, and he lost points. Why? Because the person in 1625 picked the roses himself, walked them over to his grandma, and she was happy. But the person in 2025 bought those roses on a cell phone that was made with child labor. The roses were grown with toxic pesticides that are banned in many countries. They were wrapped in 3 layers of plastic to get shipped across the ocean, which created a massive carbon footprint. And all his money went to a racist, bigoted CEO that harasses his female employees. Every day, it gets a little harder to do something good without accidentally participating in tons of things that are complicated and bad. Because we've created complicated systems. Systems of agriculture that grew those roses. Systems of transportation that shipped those roses. Systems of economy that allowed this person to pay for those roses. And systems of energy that power the whole thing. These complicated systems compound the impact of our daily decisions way beyond our good intentions. And that leaves a lot of people wondering, am I a good person? Or am I actually a bad person for participating in these systems that harm people, that harm the planet? This sentiment is especially true in the work that I do in climate change, where I hear time and time again people telling me that they can't win. They can't be a good person for their people, for the planet, and not lose their minds trying to be perfect. I do strategic design research on complex systems and help shape narratives that shift those systems. And something that I always tell my clients, regardless of the industry that they work in, is to make sure that they don't make their audience the accidental antagonist. They'll turn away from you. It's not a very motivating place to put someone if you're trying to shift their beliefs. And if we're going to survive this climate crisis, we have to shift people's beliefs, not just their behaviors, but what they believe about themselves and what they believe about the planet. Because our collective beliefs shape our culture, and our culture shapes our systems. And so to shift someone's beliefs, you must start at their story. Research shows that the things that we believe about the world stem from the way that we understand ourselves. Our beliefs stem from our identity. And so shifts in your identity are a result of shifts in your beliefs, shifts in the story of you. And so to unpack someone's story, you have to have these 3 storytelling elements that all good stories, all successful behavior change campaigns, and all excellent brands have. You have to understand the protagonist, the identity of the person that you're trying to reach. You have to identify the antagonist, the tensions working against that person. And only then can you propose a new role that you want that protagonist to step into. And I like to call that the dad role. Not because it has anything to do with paternalism or daddy issues, but because there are 3 clear factors that this identity has to have in order for the shift to be successful, DAD. And we'll get to that later in this presentation. Let's start with the protagonist, understanding the identity of the person. And I'll start with a time when I completely failed to understand the protagonist. That was a reality check for me. I was working with a celebrity beauty brand that I cannot name, but that you would recognize if you saw it. And my team prepared an impassioned presentation about how they should choose glass as their packaging instead of plastic, because glass is more sustainable, and glass is better for the planet, and the brands of the future care about the planet. And also, if you offer glass, you can have refillable containers. How great's that? And the clients said no. Not because they don't care about the planet, but because they said glass is more expensive than plastic. And it's heavier, so shipping is going to be more expensive. And it's more delicate, so we're going to have more product loss during shipping. And at this stage of launching a new venture, we cannot risk our bottom line for sustainable packaging. My team left that meeting feeling deflated, and the clients felt judged. It was a lose-lose situation. And only in retrospect did I realize my mistake. I made myself the protagonist of that story. I'm the protagonist of a story where I have a positive impact on the planet through my work. And so I care about sustainable packaging. And I tried to bring those clients into my story instead of stepping into theirs. So my team went back to the drawing board, and we started asking ourselves, what is this client's story? What is this protagonist trying to achieve? And how can we advance their narrative while also being good for the planet? So we mapped out the possibilities, we did a ton of research, and we found this one research paper that changed everything. And we handed that paper to our clients, and the paper talked about the trend of glassification, where the beauty industry is having more and more products shift from plastic containers to glass because glass is perceived as luxury compared to plastic. And people are willing to pay more for the same formula if it comes in glass than if it comes in plastic. And so we told our clients, you're building a luxury celebrity beauty brand. You can't be using plastic. Glass, on top of being sustainable, is more luxurious. We didn't even have a conversation about it. They said, you know what? You're right. Let's buy it. Nothing changed except the story. And yet, the story changed everything. Because by changing the story, we changed the protagonist. The outcome was the same. They chose glass. But we had to understand that for this protagonist, the driver was luxury, not sustainability. And I think this is a mistake that a lot of us in the climate movement accidentally make. So that's great and all. We understood the protagonist's identity, so we were able to shift their behavior. But to shift identity, you must motivate people to shift belief. And so let's talk about that motivation. Let's talk about the antagonist, the tension that motivates someone to shift their identity. Do you care about the planet? How much do you care? Enough to pay more? How much more? 10% more? 20% more? 50% more? Every day? Enough to choose inconvenience? Enough to stop flying? To quit fast fashion? To always compost? To never buy plastic? To stop driving gas cars? Enough! We were not made to care like this. How does it make you feel? It's overwhelming, and our lives are overwhelming as it is. And this shame and fear-based messaging makes it worse. And unfortunately, a lot of climate messaging ends up sounding exactly like that. It makes us feel that way. But we know from research that shame actually leads to avoidance, to defensiveness, when it comes to climate change. It doesn't work. And fear leads to avoidance, especially when it's not paired with a clear and believable action that I can take. And so shame and fear and this kind of climate messaging makes us as individuals feel like the antagonists of the climate crisis. And so we turn away, we shut down, and this is very important. We will protect our identity before we protect the planet. And so, what do we do instead? I'll give you an example. Plastics are bad for the planet. We've been giving this message to people for decades. It ends up in landfills, it's ruining ecosystems, and it's choking our turtles. And it makes me feel bad. But it also feels so big, I can't fight planetary plastic pollution. And I feel ashamed that I can't do more, but inevitably, I disengage and I drink water from that plastic water bottle anyways. Because I'm not even the protagonist of this story. It's not very motivating. But recently, the narrative has been changing to plastics are bad for your health because of emerging research. And suddenly, I'm the protagonist. And I consider myself a healthy person. And so I start wondering, why am I, as a healthy person, exposing myself to the negative health effects of plastic? And suddenly, I want to be the type of person that avoids plastic, because otherwise, there is tension between who I am and what I'm doing. That tension is called cognitive dissonance, and it's excellent fuel for identity design. And why did this message work? 2 reasons. It shifted the tension from being planetary, distant, too big to handle, to personal, something that's relevant to me every day already. And it shifted the tensions from something paralyzing, so baked in shame and fear that I don't want to deal with it, to something activating, an emotion that I actually can move with instead of want to run away from. That's why this message also worked. Plastics are not luxurious, sorry. For my clients who are luxury business owners, they could not choose plastic and stay aligned with their identity, right? But identifying this motivating antagonist is only the spark. We must now pose the role that we want the person to step into. And that's where the dad role comes in. DAD, a role that is doable, is actually possible. A role that's acceptable, socially, I will not be rejected for stepping into it. And a role that is desirable, aspirational, I want to do this. And my favorite example of a role that was successfully introduced to society is the designated driver. In French, it's called the SAM, the person that doesn't drink so that you can drive your friends back home at the end of the party. Jay Winston led this campaign and shared why it was so successful with me. He's advising one of my projects right now. He went to Scandinavia to understand why it was that this behavior was naturally emerging there already, the only place in the world. And he would go to nightclubs and ask people, how are you getting home? And why do you mean someone's volunteering to drive everyone home and stay sober? And someone said this to him that really stuck with him and informed the entire campaign. If I were to drink and drive, my friends wouldn't speak to me, and my brother would beat me up. It wasn't the risk of getting arrested, the risk of killing someone, the risk of dying. It wasn't information that shaped this. It was reputation. It was protecting your identity in a world where this belief existed, where this social norm existed. Before that, the belief was drinking with your friends means we're all getting drunk together, or you are a buzzkill, you are boring. And from the outside, people are being told that if you drink and drive with your friends, you're a threat to society, you're a bad person. And so the audience is caught between being a buzzkill and being a bad person, and that's antagonizing. It is not a motivating place to be. This role allowed the belief to shift to actually a good friend volunteers to stay sober to protect the group, as long as we take turns, because I want to party too. Now the role is doable. It's acceptable in my group of friends, and it is desirable because I earn social points for taking one for the team, right? And now you're wondering, Bruno, what does this have to do with the climate crisis? For that, we have to understand the story world, one last element of good stories. This is the setting that defines what is actually possible and believable. For example, in the movie Finding Nemo, the fish can talk to each other, but they don't suddenly grow legs and start walking on land. That wouldn't be possible or believable. It's not doable. And you want to know what is not doable in our world, in our story world? Being climate friendly. It's acceptable, it's desirable, but no one living in modern society can genuinely and fully embody the identity of being climate friendly. Not when the systems that we live in force us to harm the planet just because we're living. Every product is wrapped in plastic. Every city is designed around fossil fuels. Every rose that you buy your grandmother for her birthday might land you in the bad cosmic afterlife, even if you're a good person. And you can't shift a person's beliefs in a world that makes that belief impossible. The world we live in has a monopoly on belief. And so identities like I am climate friendly and the beliefs that we try to pack into that phrase collapse under the weight of reality. And when an identity is impossible, our brain rejects it. Science calls that identity incongruence. Hollywood calls it bad casting. The climate movement calls it apathy. But it is none of those things. It is a mismatch, a misalignment between narrative and reality. So what do we do instead? If we can't get people to be climate friendly all the way in this world, what do we do instead? We shift the beliefs that make that world possible, that make a world where we can be climate friendly possible. We don't need one grand hero's journey all the way to being perfectly climate friendly. We need 1,000 roles that people can play today. If you as an individual want to have a more positive impact on the planet and are wondering how, where do I even start? This is so overwhelming. Start at the identities you already embody. You consider yourself a healthy person, align your decisions around your health with the planet, like in the plastics situation. You're a good parent, start there with your kids. You're mindful, start there. You're price savvy, start there. Get real about reusing containers, it saves you money. So on and so forth. Start at an identity that is more manageable to shift instead of overwhelming yourself into paralysis. And if you're an organization, a business or a nonprofit trying to shift people's behaviors to be more climate friendly, you have to get more savvy. We cannot keep relying on these messages that are so planetary and distant from people's lives that they don't feel personal, they're not engaging. And we can't paralyze people accidentally. We have to rely on new and innovative messaging. And there's so many excellent examples of companies that are doing a great job at this that I cannot show you because of copyright issues. But there are. People are doing this work. Because we can believe our way into a world where we can be climate friendly. We can shift our culture to a culture where we are one with nature. Thank you very much.